Hello, and welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a program presented by the ARI Podcasting Network and hosted by George Koperna. What is STEAM? STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Mathematics. During each episode, we will take a few minutes to sit down with professionals in different STEAM-related fields to give them an opportunity to share their story and give their perspectives with the goal of promoting career awareness to potentially interested students, young professionals, and of course, anyone else who shares a fascination with these areas of study. And now, please join us as we tap into the STEAM of Consciousness.
Welcome to STEAM of Consciousness, a podcast on the ARI Podcasting Network. George Koperna is unavailable this week, so I'm your guest host, Denise Hills. Joining us today is Marcella McIntyre-Redden, who is the Director of the Energy Investigations Program at the Geological Survey of Alabama. Welcome, Marcella.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Most people don't know what happens at a geological survey. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day experience is like working at the Geological Survey of Alabama?
Sure. At the Geological Survey of Alabama, our mission is to provide information on the natural resources of the state of Alabama to anyone who wants it. Really, mostly the public of Alabama, the people who live here and the businesses. In my group, we do mostly research on oil and gas, coal, and we've done a lot of carbon storage research in the last 25 years in our group.
That's really, really interesting. I don't think many people know that. Most people are familiar with USGS, but most people aren't aware that there are also state geologic surveys. So can you tell me a little bit about what a state survey might do rather than the USGS?
Sure. We focus, since we are a state survey, and most states have one, we focus on the resources specifically in our state, in Alabama. And we make a lot of publications that are very, again, specific for Alabama. USGS often does things that are for a whole region, like they might do the Southern Appalachians or the Basin and Range, kind of larger scale things, whereas we look at this part of Alabama. We've done maps specific to counties. We're doing a lot of very detailed mapping in other groups in our survey. We do a lot of, we have biologists here who do a lot of resource looking at aquatic species and things like that, and plant species. And again, it's more focused just straight on Alabama.
So the Geological Survey of Alabama, just like USGS, doesn't just do geology. It also does things like biology and and water and other natural resources. That's really, really interesting. So Marcella, on this podcast, we often talk about people's journey to how they got where they are. How did you end up working for the Geological Survey of Alabama?
Well, I got pretty lucky. So I wanted to be a geologist when I was a little kid. And when I graduated with my bachelor's, I went into the workforce and I worked for a small engineering and environmental firm. And it was not the most interesting job. There were two kinds of projects mostly that I was working on. And one project was really interesting, but they were kind of all drying up in our region. And so I was going to be doing the really boring stuff. And so I went back to graduate school. And I lucked out in that my advisor had a project where I was working on the project as my research assistantship with researchers here at the survey. And that kind of got my foot in the door. So I got to meet them all and work with them. And a couple of years after I finished my master's, they were hiring, and I was on the registry. Getting hired for the state of Alabama is not the most straightforward thing, but so yeah, kind of lucked out. But
yeah, well, we'll get back to that a little bit, but I want to get back. I want to talk a little bit about, what was your initial spark to get interested in science? You said that you wanted to be a geologist from when you were a little kid.
Yeah.
Was there like an initial thing, or is this just something you always knew that you wanted to do?
So the summer I turned 6, my grandparents, my mom went along to help drive, took us out west on this big trip, and we went to Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons and Grand Canyon, Bryce Canyon. I'm sure I'm forgetting places that we stopped, and I just fell in love with rocks. I started picking them up. My grandfather was not very pleased when we got back to their house and discovered my suitcase was full of rocks. Not that he could be mad at me because I was his baby, but his baby granddaughter. But that started me on, and my parents were always very good about, kind of encouraging anything we were interested in. So they started getting me books on geology, and I early on got very fascinated with plate tectonics, and I got a lot of strange looks when people ask an 8-year-old girl what they want to be when they grow up. They don't expect geophysicist to come out of their mouth. But I wanted to be like an earthquake geophysicist when I was little. Wanted to study the big motions of the planet. So.
Yeah. Asking an 8-year-old girl and the response being geophysicist. Most adults don't even know what a geophysicist is, and so I think that's pretty awesome. But I know you when you started your undergraduate degree. Did you start as a geology major?
I didn't. I technically started as an undeclared major in arts and sciences, and then I moved into education, the College of Education. I had some teachers who just really, I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be able to inspire kids to want to learn. And also I was like, well, I had some plans post-graduation that ended up not coming to fruition, but that's personal things. And so I was like, well, I don't know where I would work. It's not a job you can get in any town. Whereas being a teacher, you can be a teacher. You can be a science teacher in any town. Everybody needs science teachers. And then somewhere later in undergrad, around my junior year, I was like, this is not, I'm not really cut out to be in the classroom every day. And so I changed back to geology, or declared my major as geology, and finished up in geology.
Yeah, see, to me, it's like I knew a little bit about that that process that you went through, that you were making choices based on your interests plus the influence of your personal life, like how to make that balance. And so finding that right balance, I think, is really important. And so I'm glad that you shared that bit, because that's something I think is really important, that sometimes you're making choices based not just on your interests, but also what's right for you and your family.
And of course, so in the late 90s, you couldn't work from home. That wasn't nearly a thing. So
so things have definitely evolved and changed at that time. But there is also a lot of geology you can't do from home.
Yes.
So when you were finishing your undergraduate, at that point, were you thinking, oh, hey, now's the time for me to go get a master's, or I'm not going to do further education, I'm just going to go work? What was your thought process when you were wrapping up your undergraduate?
So I was, I had kind of thinking I was going to go to grad school at some point, but I wasn't going to go right away. And so that's why I kind of started looking for jobs, and the engineering firm.
Yeah. So you knew you wanted to go to graduate school, but you weren't going to go right away. What kind of played into that decision?
That again was part of that was the kind of the personal plans that fell through. My boyfriend at the time he was in a field where they really go straight into grad school if you're going to do grad school. And so like the plan was I was going to work and he'd go to grad school, and then I'd go to grad school and he'd work. And it was the plan. And then we broke up. So
yeah. Well, again, because I know some of our listeners are in undergraduate right now, and sometimes they're trying to make that decision as to whether they're going to go straight to graduate school, or if they're going to work for a while, or move on in another way. So you've always had an interest in geology, and you said that you wanted to be an earthquake geophysicist, and I know that that's not what you do now. So how did you move from wanting to be a geophysicist studying earthquakes to somebody who specializes in what's called structural geology and focusing on kind of that aspect of things?
So my interest in earthquake geophysics was from plate tectonics. It was looking at how the plates on the earth are moving and how those deformations. And when I was going through my undergrad, I just really loved the structural geology class and I wanted to do more of that. So when I went to grad school, I basically emailed my structural geology professor, was like, hey, can I come back and be your student? And he said yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for those who aren't familiar with structural geology, can you give like a really high level
yeah, so
definition
structural geology is looking at how the rocks have been deformed, and so how they've been folded or faulted, and that can be anything from very small, like holding a rock in your hand and looking at the folds and something that's the size of something you can hold in your hand, to something the size of a continent, more or less, or an entire mountain range kind of cross section kind of thing.
So I know one of the things, I think might be a nice little segue into one of the other things I know you do at the Geological Survey of Alabama. So you mentioned that you do a lot of work kind of related to geologic energy, whether that's oil and gas research or geologic carbon storage. But one of the things that falls under your domain, one of the things that you help supervise, is something that helps inform a lot of that, and that is the geological core warehouse. Could you tell me a little bit more about the core warehouse, like what it is and why it's important?
Sure. One of the things, the way I often describe it to people who aren't geologists, is it's a library of rocks. So we're in the process of moving to a new facility, but there's about for the first floor of the building I'm in, half of the building, excuse me, is a giant storage space. It's 50,000 square feet, if I remember correctly, with 14-foot shelving full of rock, or it was until a few weeks ago. It's almost empty of rock now.
I like to describe it as looking kind of like that final scene in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just like shelves, floor to ceiling of boxes of rocks. And it's really, really impressive. And so,
and we have samples from wells that were drilled at least as early as the 19 teens up through things that were drilled this year. We have both core, which is a cylinder of rock that's cut, as well as cuttings, which are like the little teeny tiny bits of rock you get when you're just kind of drilling to make a hole. And you get different information from both, or different levels of information from both of those. But we have something from every county in the state of Alabama. We have some stuff from outside the state of Alabama. It's a great resource for geologists in the state, looking for almost anything you want to look for in the rocks.
Yeah. So what can these cores tell you that we can't necessarily, or cores or samples tell us that we may not be able to get if we're just looking at information that we can gather on the surface?
So there's rocks at the surface, and a lot of the rocks we have cores of do exist at the surface. But when you look at them underground, sometimes what the kind of rock is, or what the porosity or permeability, porosity is how much empty space there is in the rock, so how many little holes there are. Permeability is how connected those holes are. Sometimes that can change from where it is at the surface to where it is underground. There are also rocks underground in Alabama that don't exist at the surface anywhere. The sea level rose past there. And so the only way you can see those rocks is to take core of it. And it gives you an idea what these rocks look like anywhere from tens of feet below the surface to tens of thousands of feet. We have core from about 20,000 feet below sea level. And you can get a lot of information that you can't get other ways from subsurface, in the subsurface.
So to me, that sample repository, that core repository, must be incredibly valuable, both monetarily and just information wise. I love how you described it as a library of rocks, especially because I know that people essentially can come and check out some of those cores so they can do further research and testing on those cores to find out more information. So even though some of these were taken, 10, 20, 50, even 100 years ago, they still provide value, just like books can still provide value even when they're older. That's really, really interesting, and I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about, how much value that can add. So thank you for taking charge of that and kind of helping shepherd that. And making sure that continues to be a useful resource for all kinds of scientists, because it's not just geologists who look at those sometimes. So, it's like we've talked a little bit about how you got to where you are, what you do in your day to day. When you're talking to, someone who is just starting out in science, or is maybe even in high school, is there like one bit of advice from your journey that you might like to share with them?
I would say study what you love. That's a good way to go. But do think about what kind of job you want to do when you get done studying. You can study geology and go on and be a chef if you want, but that might be an odd choice to go to college for that. But it might be where you end up. And pay attention to what you're, it's, obviously pay attention in your majors classes, right? So if you're studying geology, pay attention to those, but any of the classes you take will help you with where you're going, and, I have to do a lot of writing. So don't just going to go, I'm going to be a scientist, I don't have to write. Or, you need to know how to do math. Sometimes.
The writing, I think, is a really, that's a really important thing that I don't think we necessarily touch on as often as we should. Still, our main way of communicating what we do as scientists, some of us go out and talk about it, but the majority of it is still through writing. And so being able to write clearly, and did you ever take like a scientific writing course? Or
I didn't take any scientific writing classes. When I was an undergrad, we had to take what they called writing courses, and you had to take at least one in your major, but that just meant we wrote a paper. We had to write a long, like a 10-page research paper for that class, and that was it. And then, of course, I had to write a thesis, which I got a lot of, which is a lot of writing usually, but.
So somewhat related, I know in your current position, you actually have the opportunity sometimes to hire people. When you're hiring somebody, what kinds of skills are you looking for that's not necessarily, I got straight A's in my geology major? What other sorts of skills, when you're looking to hire somebody, are you looking for somebody to work at the Geological Survey?
GIS is now very important. That's one of the ways we produce maps to show people and share information. Are you comfortable writing? Are you, I'm trying to think here. Are you good at communicating? So sometimes not just written communication, but if we have like a public meeting, are you comfortable going to a conference and giving a conference, a talk or presenting a poster? Those kinds of things are really good. Some of the classes specific is, other groups here have looking for field mappers, and that's not always an easy one to find, even in geology. But yeah, those are some of the
what about things maybe not related to coursework in specific?
Yeah.
I know sometimes when I'm looking to hire somebody, I want to know whether or not they can see a project through to completion.
Yes.
That they can plan like that. Is that something that you look for as well?
Yes. Being able to kind of plan how you're going to finish a job, making sure you actually see it through. So if we have a project, I want somebody who can kind of take a piece of that project for me and do it and run with that while I do other things, because I'm a manager now. I don't always get to do the science side of things. So.
Yeah, that's always a hard balance when sometimes the managers, you get there because you've been a really good scientist, and then you don't always get to do as much science as you like anymore. But I know that you do get to still do some science, which I think is really great. Well, Marcella, this has been lovely. Are there any final words that you want to share with our audience about your experience?
Think just follow what you love. I mean, just
I think that is really wonderful advice. Follow what you love, and see where it takes you. Thank you so much, Marcella. Marcella McIntyre-Redden from the Geological Survey of Alabama, where she currently works as the director of the Energy Investigations Program. This has been S.T.E.A.M of Consciousness podcast from the ARI Podcasting Network. I'm your substitute host, Denise Hills, sitting in for George Koperna. Our podcast is produced by Ryan Kessler. Thank you so much, and join us next time.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to listen to new episodes of S.T.E.A.M of Consciousness, available on your preferred podcast listening station.